Okay, so picture this. You're playing a high-stakes team sport, right? Football, basketball, soccer. You're driving hard toward the goal, and then suddenly the defense shifts.
Oh.
That split second where you process the opponent's movement, decide to cut left instead of right, and then, execute that explosive change of direction.
Yeah.
Is that movement about just raw physical speed, or is something much, much smarter happening in that moment?
It is absolutely the latter. I mean, most of us, and that includes coaches and athletes, we tend to lump pure speed in with true agility.
Right.
But for any serious team sport player, agility is so much more complex than just, running around a pre-planned set of cones. It's about merging your motor skills with really sharp decision-making, all under intense pressure.
That very distinction separating basic change of direction speed from what you might call smart speed, that's really the core mission of this deep dive. We're here to give you, the learner, a data-driven blueprint for optimal training, focusing on how to train the brain and the body at the same time.
And for that, we are diving deep into a really fantastic, systematic review and meta-analysis. It's titled, Optimizing Agility Training in Team Sport Players, the Role of Perception-Action Coupling.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but it's a comprehensive piece of work. It was published by Zhiwei Zhao, Yuhang Liu, and Kai Zhu in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine back in 2026. And they analyzed a ton of data to quantify just how much this kind of training actually moves the needle.
Okay, so before we get into the numbers, let's just anchor this with some key definitions. Terminology really matters here.
It's essential. So first, we have to define change of direction, or the pre-planned task.
Yeah.
Think of it like a closed skill.
Like a T-drill or a pro agility shuttle. You know exactly where you're going.
Exactly. You know the path. It's really just about pure muscle mechanics.
Okay, and then we have the gold standard, agility.
Right. Agility, or true agility as they call it, is a rapid whole-body movement that involves changing velocity or direction. But, and this is the key part, in response to an external stimulus.
So that unpredictable stimulus, the moving opponent, the loose ball, that's the big difference.
That's everything, which means true agility requires what's called perception-action coupling, or PACI.
PACI.
Yeah. PACI is that seamless integration of perception and cognition. So things like anticipation, reading an opponent's shoulders, making a split-second choice with the actual physical movement.
So because that coupling is so necessary, the review basically argues that you can't take findings from simple cone drills and just assume they apply to a real game.
You've got it. You can be the fastest athlete in the world running around cones, but if you can't read the defense, you are not agile.
Perfectly put. If you only train to be fast, you get fast. If you train to be fast and smart, that's when you get agile. So let's get to the data. What did this review with its, 28 studies actually find about training that emphasizes this perception-action coupling?
Okay, so they aggregated 53 effect sizes to look at 3 main outcomes, and the results really, really validated this PAC approach. First, for the reactive agility test, or RAT, they found a large improvement.
Wow, a large improvement. So that confirms that this kind of training, the kind that mimics game conditions, it really works.
It seriously works. Now, for the purely pre-planned tests, the pre-planned agility test, or a PAT, they still saw a moderate improvement. So there's some carryover.
Okay.
But here's the most telling part. For pure reaction tests, where you only register a stimulus but don't perform a coupled movement, the effect was statistically non-significant.
So just to be clear, if you just practice reacting to a light with your finger without moving your whole body, it doesn't reliably make you more agile on the field.
Exactly. The magic isn't just in seeing the light. The magic is in seeing the light while you're already moving and having to adjust your entire motor pattern in response. If you don't train the coupling, you just don't build agility.
So this PAPAS training, it's kind of accelerating the shift from what cognitive scientists call type 2 processing. That's the slow, deliberate thinking, to type 1 processing, the fast, automatic, intuitive stuff that wins games.
You're turning deliberation into instinct. That's a perfect way to put it.
And what are the specific cognitive functions that are really critical for making that instinct happen?
Well, the researchers pointed to 3. First is working memory. This is your brain's ability to hold and juggle multiple pieces of information at once.
Like tracking 2 defenders while also seeing your teammate cutting to the basket?
Precisely. All in milliseconds. The second is inhibitory control. This is your ability to suppress irrelevant information or, ignore a fake.
Ah, not taking the cheese.
Exactly. It's what stops you from lunging the wrong way when an attacker throws a convincing feint. If you bite on the fake, Your inhibitory control just failed.
That feels like the difference between an amateur and a pro defender right there.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the third is cognitive flexibility. This is just the ability to rapidly switch tasks. You were on offense, now you've been stripped of the ball, and you have to instantly switch back to defense.
Okay, so if this specialized training works so well, who gains the most from it? I mean, should coaches be targeting high school kids with this, or does it pay off more for the seasoned pros?
That's a great question. And the review looked at both age and training status. The findings were pretty interesting. Starting with age, it was the junior athletes, so the 11 to 14-year-olds, who showed the largest responses.
The biggest jump.
The biggest jump. Senior players, so those over 18, still saw a large effect, but it was slightly smaller.
You know, that makes some sense. The junior players are developing so fast physically anyway. Maybe this training just kind of rides that wave of physical maturation.
That could be part of it. It might suggest that before adolescence, physical factors are more dominant, but as players mature, the perceptual and cognitive factors become more prominent. The authors really stress, though, that you should always couple both elements, especially in those crucial developmental years.
Okay, so that's age. But what about training status? This is where it gets a little paradoxical, right? Because in strength training, the beginner always gains more than the elite.
Right. And that did not hold true here. This is a critical finding. The national-level athletes actually demonstrated a greater response to this kind of training than the developmental athletes did.
Wait, really? The elites gained more. How does that work? Shouldn't they have less room for improvement?
Well, the thinking goes back to those cognitive skills we just talked about. Elite players already have superior match experience. Their working memory, their inhibitory control, it's already at a high level.
So they have a better foundation to build on.
Exactly. They have a superior transfer effect. They can take the input from this specialized paid training and immediately integrate it into their game better than a novice can. They already know how to read the game. This just makes their decision-making faster.
That totally shifts the discussion from who benefits to how you should implement it. If I'm a coach or an athlete designing a program, what's the optimal dose? What's the blueprint?
Okay, this is the really practical guidance. For training duration, they found the relationship is curvilinear.
Curvilinear, so not a straight line of improvement.
Not at all. It means the effectiveness peaks at approximately 7 to 8 weeks.
So you get your fastest, biggest gains in that first 7 to 8 week block. Then what happens?
After that, the effect plateaus or can even diminish a bit. The authors think it might be due to training monotony.
Right.
So the practical takeaway is that you don't do this intense pack training constantly year-round. You cycle in with an intense 7 to 8 week block, maybe introduce new drills, and then cycle out to focus on other things.
That makes it a phase of training, not a permanent fixture. What about frequency? How many times a week?
Here, the relationship was linear and positive. So more is better. Higher frequency led to better adaptation. The really favorable results were strongly associated with high frequency, so more than 3 times per week.
More than 3, wow.
Yeah, with the absolute maximum gains actually being seen at 6 times per week. For coding these rapid responses, consistency and repetition are just vital.
High frequency, but for a finite window of 7 to 8 weeks.
Got it. Last piece of the puzzle. How long should the sessions be?
An hour.
This one was interesting. There wasn't a strong overall relationship. But when they looked at where the best results clustered, the most significant positive effects were all around 20 to 25 minutes per session.
That's a very specific short window, 25 minutes. Why?
It's all about mental fatigue. This kind of training is incredibly demanding on your brain. You're constantly having to respond and make decisions. And mental fatigue is a real psychobiological state that just tanks your performance. So to maximize the quality of the cognitive part, you have to keep the sessions sharp, intense, and short.
So the quality of your decision-making just plummets after that 25-minute mark. That's a huge takeaway for program design. Put these drills early in the session and keep them brief.
Precisely. Maximize cognitive quality, not the quantity of minutes.
Okay. Beyond the timing, the type of stimulus you use is a huge factor. I mean, we're talking about the difference between reacting to a flashing light versus an opponent's subtle shift in body weight.
Right, the stimulus divide. And surprisingly, the isolated visual stimuli, so systems like FitLight, they actually produce the largest average training effect.
That feels backwards. Why would a non-sport specific light show a bigger gain than a human opponent?
Because those systems are really, really good at one thing, training the pure speed of decision-making. They isolate that neural pathway for rapid reaction without the the ambiguity of human movement.
I see. So they make you faster at the process of reacting.
Yes, but the big drawback is that they completely restrict anticipation. You can't learn to read subtle cues from a flashing light.
Which is where human stimuli come in.
Exactly. Human stimuli like mirror drills or a coach giving cues produce the second largest effect. And the huge advantage there is sport-specific context. It directly trains that all-important anticipation skill.
This sounds like a perfect chance to cycle the training. What did the authors recommend? Which stimulus and when?
They advise using those visual stimuli, maybe with a live-size video display to make it more realistic, during the off-season or preparation stage.
To build that baseline decision speed.
Exactly. But during the in-season period, you should prioritize human stimuli. You need those sport-specific cues to maximize the transfer of skill directly into the game when it matters most.
We've built a really powerful case for PAOKI training here, but to be good consumers of the research, we have to talk about limitations. Where did the authors say we should be cautious?
Right, the caveats. So the certainty of the evidence was moderate for the reactive agility test, which is good. We can be pretty confident there.
Okay.
However, the certainty was low for the pre-planned tests and actually very low for the pure reaction test.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful with our interpretations outside of that core reactive agility.
And what about the sports and the people who were studied?
This is a big one. The evidence base was heavily dominated by studies in soccer and basketball.
So if you're a rugby or a hockey coach, you should take this with a grain of salt.
You should be cautious before applying it broadly, yes. And another severe limitation was the underrepresentation of female and mixed gender samples. So we have very little guidance right now on potential gender differences in these training gains.
That's a critical gap. Any other major limitations for coaches?
The last one was the load monitoring gap. Training volume and intensity were just inconsistently reported across the studies, or often not reported at all.
Which makes it really hard to scale these high-frequency programs safely.
Exactly. If you're going to ask an athlete to do this 6 times a week, you have to be using tools RPE, GPS, heart rate to monitor their load and prevent injury or burnout. You can't just guess.
Okay, that brings us to the summary. We've established that agility is really a cognitive skill wrapped inside a modal task. And training is most effective when it's focused on that perception-action coupling.
And we have a blueprint. The optimal dose seems to be an initial block of 7 to 8 weeks, delivered at a high frequency of more than 3 times a week. And keep those sessions short and sharp, around 20 to 25 minutes, to stave off mental fatigue.
And remember to cycle your stimulus. Visual speed work in the off-season, human anticipation work in-season. But here's the final provocative thought for you, the learner. The review found one ultimate knowledge gap: retention.
Yeah.
We know this training works, but the studies on how long these gains actually last, especially those crucial cognitive benefits, are really inconsistent and just underrepresented in the research.
Which raises the big question. If that initial adaptation window is 7 to 8 weeks, how often do you need to cycle back through that intense phase to maintain peak performance all season long? That's really the next frontier for applied sports science.
If you want to dig into the exact methodologies and see the specific data that led to these conclusions, we really encourage you to explore the full article by Zhao, Liu, and Zhu in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine.
Absolutely. And be sure to follow the channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the research that'll help you get well informed